So good morning to all of you. Welcome to our Sunday service here at Namaste Lake Chapala, our Zoom Zikr Sufi Sunday. This is a time for us to come together and to focus only on the beloved, only on that longing and that yearning for God. Last week we shared a very, very simple quote and poem from Rumi that said, "Don't look for water, stay thirsty." In other words, keep that longing going. Don't try to satisfy that longing with anything, but only everything. Don't try to satisfy the longing you feel with anything that you see out here or think that might be outside you. It will only be satisfied by everything, by that full, complete, total embrace of the beloved, where lover and beloved become one. Ishq Allah, Mabud Allah. God is love, lover and beloved. This is really the foundation of every mystical path, especially Sufism, which is all focused on that longing, that yearning, that union. It's about dissolving into that infinite ocean, as if we are all made out of salt. We're salt people, salt figures, and we're put into the ocean, which is the essence of that, and we dissolve. That which we thought we were no longer is and never really was. We dissolve into that ocean of grace. And there is no greater bliss than that dissolving. There's no greater heat than the fire that burns away everything we don't need and everything that we are not. And it's that fire I want to talk about here today. Because since one of the lessons last week, there's been something that's been running through my mind that I haven't seemed to be able to let go of. And I'm glad I haven't been able to let go of, because it really showed me something so important on this path. You see, most of us, we either spend our time avoiding the fire. In other words, if you imagine, let's say, a huge fire, huge bonfire in a very big clearing in the forest. Many of us are going to be very afraid of that fire. We're going to stay as far away as we can in the cold of the forest. We don't realize that this fire, this amazing burning thing in the forest, is really our salvation. So many of us are going to be afraid. We're going to stay in the forest where we're cold and alone. But others, maybe some of us, are going to come and we're going to dance around that fire. We're going to feel the heat of that fire. But there comes a point where we ask the question, or when the I Am presence within you asks the question, why do you keep dancing around this fire? Don't you realize that the fire itself is your liberation, that in the center, in the core of that fire is the beloved? Dive into that fire. Don't be afraid. The heat you feel against your skin is grace. And this is not a celebration. We think that we come together with all of our friends and we're celebrating and dancing around this fire. But as we're about to hear, it's not a celebration at all. It's really a funeral pyre. But not a funeral in the way that we usually think, where something is lost. It's a funeral in which everything is gained. A fire in which everything is gained, where nothing is lost. So 2 things that I want to share with you today. One is a poem that I just finished writing a few minutes ago, right before we began. And the second is a chant, a Sufi chant, that I'll introduce to you in a moment. But first, let me share this poem, and we'll see where this takes us. So I'm just going to invite you to take a deep breath and open up to receive this sacred message. The poem is called "Why Dance around the fire? Why do you keep dancing faster and faster around this sacred fire? You imagine it's a celebration, and you invite all your friends to join you, dancing round and round the fire, getting as close as you can. But then you turn away when the heat singes your hair or burns your cheek when you lean closer. This is no celebration. It's a funeral pyre you dance around. This fire is meant to destroy the high brick walls you claim, not build them higher. Just dive into the fire. So why do you keep dancing around this fire? You believe that the faster you dance, the higher your mind will soar. But I am telling you something you refuse to hear. That dancing fast around the fire only hypnotizes you into believing that you're safe at the fire's edge. The only safety you'll find is at the very center of this blaze, the very heart of this flaming pyre. This fire is meant to burn away the you believe is true and reveal the truth you'll never find dancing at the fire's edge. So, why do you keep dancing when the beloved is waiting for you at the very center of the rising flames? Dive, 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 dive into the fire. Be burned alive by the heat of God's holy breath. Dive into the fire. That's what we're being called to do. But for almost all of us, that dance that we do around the fire seems to be the spiritual path. Maybe it's part of it. Maybe coming out of that cold forest and beginning to be warmed by that fire. Maybe it's a beginning step. But we're not called to keep dancing around and around. We're called to dive in, because it's only then that you thought you were is burned away. And then we realize the essence of that chant. Ishq Allah, Mabud Allah. God is love, lover and beloved as one. It's only when we are burned alive by that fire that we realize that lover and the beloved are one. So dive. For almost all of us, that's going to seem like an impossible thing. But I'm telling you, it's really the only thing that we need now. So I want to take this a little bit deeper with a chant. And I'm going to teach you, before we start, an Arabic phrase that I learned yesterday from my Sufi teacher, Ghassan. And basically it means dive into the fire of God. And I'm gonna say these words several times, and I'm gonna ask you to say them after me. Keep muted, but say them after me so you can get used to it. The words are in da mej, finar ilah. Oh, someone got unmuted. Okay. In da mej, finar ilah. I'm gonna break it in two, and I want you to say this afterwards. In da mej, final ilah, final ilah. Now I'll say the whole thing and ask you to repeat it. In da mej, final ilah. In da mej, final ilah. So the chorus of the Song sounds like this. Indamesh fina ila, indamesh finad ila, indamesh finad ila. Just dive into the fire of God. Okay, sing that with me. Indamesh finad ila, indamesh finad ila, indamesh finad ila. Just dive into the fire of God. Let's do it one more time. Indamesh finad ila, indamesh finad ila, indamesh finad ila. Just dive into the fire of God. Just dive into the fire of God. Okay. Now there's one other part that I'll just sing once or twice, and then we'll go right into that part and we'll sing it over and over and let it go deeper and deeper every time. Every time you sing this, feel as if this is your willingness. You're stoking your willingness to dive. Here we go. Why dance around the fire? Why dance around the fire? Why dance around the fire when you can just dive in? Why dance around the fire? Why dance around the fire? Why dance around the fire when your life could begin? Let's do that one more time. Why dance around the fire? Why dance around the fire? Why dance around the fire when you could just dive in? Why dance around the fire? Why dance around the fire? Why dance around the fire when your life could begin? Okay, now to Indamesh final ila. Indamesh final ila. Indamesh final ila. Indamesh final ila. Just dive into the fire of God. Just dive into the fire of God. Indamesh final ila. Indamesh final ila. Indamesh final ila. Just dive into the fire of God. I hope you're singing with me. Just dive into the fire of God. The first step to dive into the fire of God is to sing along. So join me. Indamesh final ila. Indamesh final ila. Indamesh final ila. Just dive into the fire of God. Just dive into the fire of God. In Damesh Finar Ilah, in Damesh Finar Ilah, in Damesh Finar Ilah. Dive now, just dive into the fire of God. Just dive into the fire of God. One more time. Really give it all now. This is your diving. In Damesh Finar Ilah, in Damesh Finar Ilah, in Damesh Finar Ilah. Just dive into the fire of God. Just dive into the fire of God. So why dance around the fire? Why dance around the fire? Why dance around the fire when you can just dive in? Why dance around the fire? Why dance around the fire? Why dance around the fire when your life could begin? When your life at last could begin. So take a deep breath. And let's just hold still for a moment. And feel that fire within us. Feel that flame burning bright. And abandoning all fear. And feel that longing to just dive in. No more waiting. No more looking. Just dive. And as you hold that silence, listen to this poem one more time. Why do you keep dancing faster and faster around this sacred fire? You imagine it's a celebration and you invite all your friends to join you, dancing round and around the fire, getting as close as you can. But then you turn away when the heat singes your hair or burns your cheek when you lean closer. This is no celebration. It's a funeral pyre you dance around. This fire is meant to destroy the high brick walls you claim, not building them higher. So dive into the fire. Why do you keep dancing around this fire? You believe that the faster you dance, the higher your mind will soar. But I am telling you something that you refuse to hear. That dancing fast around the fire only hypnotizes you into believing that you're safe at the fire's edge. The only safety you'll find is at the very center of this blaze, the very heart of the flaming pyre. This fire is meant to burn away the you believe is true and reveal the truth you'll never find dancing at the fire's edge. So why do you keep dancing when the beloved is waiting for you at the very center of the rising flames? Dive. Dive into the fire. Be burned alive by the heat of God's holy breath. Ishq Allah, Mabud Allah. God is love. And even Baby Yoda knows it. I like seeing Baby Yoda dancing and singing with us. So, Vicky, I'm going to invite you. I think, yes, there you are. Good to see you, darling.
I'm so glad I'm here, Jimmy.
I am too.
Thank you. So my heart is bursting because I was just looking at this whole issue in my own heart and mind. And I wanted just to be very direct about what it means to dive into the fire and how the dance around the fire, so well said, can be hypnotizing. Even when it's all spiritually intended and all sorts of words and whirling dervishes dancing, all of it is still of the mind, a perception of the body. When we dive into the fire, we can dive into an experience where if we find it painful, it's because it's the place, we've hit the core of separation within ourselves. And that core is purified. That's why it is a funeral pyre. It's purified, but only by our total willingness to surrender and do nothing, not try to change the feeling, not trying to get out of the discomfort, not try to understand it, but simply a total willing surrender and allow it to do whatever needs to be done. And by the grace of God, and I never know, none of us really know how that happens, we come out of it not dead, but alive. The other way is when we are not hitting the split in our own unconscious, and we really are moving into a direct experience of God. And there's no dance around the fire, no book, no words, no actions, no doing good works. None of it is more important than simply being here now, being very present and welcoming and allowing everything as it is in our interior experience. And then that sometimes and often gives way to a spaciousness of presence. And the Course calls it the holy instant. And we can enter because of deep trauma, or we can enter for that yearning you talk about so much, that longing for God, for holiness, for our oneness, for the fullness of what we are. And that's well and wonderful, and we come into this abiding spaciousness. But the most important entry into this fire, and the thing I'm very sure to be alert for, is where the discomfort is, where my hair is singed, where it hurts, to simply be surrendered and allow every feeling to be as uncomfortable as it may be, until that veneer of self-identity is somehow burned away by grace. And not to be fooled by the hypnotizing dance on the outside, conversations with holy people and friends, and reading books and listening to music and doing chants. They can all be a spiritual bypass as much as a heroin addict doing drugs to avoid the pain of immediate experience. We mustn't avoid the pain of immediate experience. That's the fire. Dive into it and allow it and welcome it and feel it. And that's where courage is. That's the seed of courage. That's the experience of true transformation. That's the transfiguration that we're all invited to. And right now, because there's such a collective projection around the politics in our world, where we see people so polarized and somehow very distraught about one position or the other, it's the perfect place to jump into the fire and recognize that we wouldn't be holding to some position so violently with passion and anger or hurt or whatever it is, blame, unless it was hitting on this core place of separation within us, where our will to be separate is trying to survive. And we're at the edge of the fire, where now, with a little bit of understanding, if we jump right in, this situation, political, personal, whatever it is, that's causing us angst, is our transfiguration moment. And it's wonderful that we're in it collectively, because our minds are joined and we can help one another. But as each of us, and that's why it's each one of us, it comes down to very personal experience of each of us literally jumping into the fire of whatever troubles us and doing nothing with it. Nothing. Don't sing a song, don't write a book, don't read a book. Just be in it and let grace deliver us. Amen, brother.
Oh my gosh. I want to applaud or something. That was amazing. You hit it right. Like you're like an archer, and you pulled that bow back and you just right to the core, right to the center. Bullseye. Vicky, thank you. That was such a beautiful, concrete understanding of what that means. It means hold still within the pain, within the shadow. Don't try and do anything with it. Just dive into it. And that is the light as well. It may appear as darkness, but an owl that its eyes are made to see in the dark. If it opens its eyes in the daytime, it seems like darkness. It burns. And that's the same thing. We've been so accustomed to being in those shadows that when we are first exposed to the light, it appears as darkness. And yet, if we stay there, if we just keep holding still, don't need to do anything, it burns away everything else. And I want to share a little story, just a few sentences that I shared, probably a few weeks ago now, but I think it describes this perfectly. It says, a group of moths came upon a large fire, something they had never seen before, and they wondered about its nature. One of the moths volunteered to investigate, and it flew nearer the flame. Feeling its heat, the moth flew back to the others, saying, "The fire is hot, so heat must be its nature." Another moth said that there must be more to its nature than heat, so it flew closer than the others, and the flame singed its wings. It flew back to the other moths and said, "Not only is the fire hot, but it also burns. But the nature of fire is destruction." But then the third moth decided to have one final look, and it flew straight into the flame and was never seen again. I love that story. All right, let's shoot over to Namaste here real quick. Go ahead and unmute your microphone there at Namaste, and I'm going to go ahead and spotlight that for everyone here.